Georgia's 22 football schedule released just now, the 2022 schedule. We're going to walk you through it. Dean Legge from Dog Post, making you a smarter Georgia fan. And yeah, a lot of people jumping online right now to see this, and I know it will probably live on for a while on YouTube. Let's get right to it. The first game has already been talked about a lot. Oregon and Georgia opening up the Saturday of the Labor Day weekend in Atlanta. Gary Stokan and his crew at Chick-fil-A, the Chick-fil-A kickoff game. That's going to be a huge game for Georgia and Oregon too. These are both teams that are probably going to come in as top 5 or 10 teams. That's a huge game to start the season. And then you come to back to Athens, September 10th against Samford. That should be an easy win for the Dogs. And then a return game to South Carolina. Georgia just played, when I'm recording this, Georgia just played South Carolina and beat their skulls in again. That'll be a different contest up there in Columbia in September of 22. So September 17th in Columbia. And then home Kent State before the season, before September closes. So September 24th, Kent State comes to Athens. Probably should win at least 3 games there. You would think maybe 4. Let's just see how good Oregon's going to be. I think they're going to be pretty good. So that's certainly not a gimme game. And then you get into the meat of the SEC schedule. October 1st, road game to Middle Earth out there in Missouri, Columbia, Missouri, to face a Tiger team that it's never easy to win out there in Missouri. Some years are easier than others, but it's a challenging road trip for somebody on this screen right now. I'll tell you that right now. You got Auburn coming to Georgia on October 8th. So that's one of these games where obviously it used to be in November and everybody's still getting used to Auburn and Georgia playing in October. It's weird. Don't get me wrong, but it is what the future is. For now, we'll see how it goes as time goes on when Texas and Oklahoma come into the league. But Georgia-Auburn on October 8th in Athens. October 15th, Georgia's going to welcome Vanderbilt to Athens for the first time at that point since 2018. It'll be the first time that they come to Athens since 2018. So Vandy at Georgia, 2015. The off week for the Dogs is going to be October 15th. That's the week before Jacksonville. October 22nd, the week before Jacksonville. So Georgia, Florida, as usual, the Saturday before or around Halloween. That's a tough game, obviously, very difficult. And then Georgia, Tennessee the very next week. So that's where we're going to talk about that in a minute. You're going to want to stay tuned for that section of the draw. And then back-to-back road games to close the season. I got to look it up, but I can't recall the last time Georgia played back-to-back road games to close a season in conference play. I mean, they're opening with a road game, and they are closing with 2 road games. We'll see you in Athens in the middle of the season because they're not playing there at the end of the year until Tech comes to town. So a game at Mississippi State, certainly a game Georgia should win. November 12th, 2022 at Mississippi State in Starkville. And then the Saturday before Thanksgiving, Georgia, Kentucky in Lexington. That's going to be a cold game. Georgia, listen, it's so hard to know what the future will be with these schedules because we're at a hiccup moment here where we've got Missouri and Texas A&M into the league, and now all of a sudden Oklahoma and Florida and the Horns are coming in. So I don't know if this is what the future is going to be or if we're like band-aiding this thing for a little bit of time. Then you got the game with the Jackets will be in Athens in 2022 to close the season. So I've got a lot of thoughts on this. I mean, there are 2 moments that jump out at you, which is the season opener, which we knew about against Oregon. That's going to be a hard game. Georgia certainly could lose that game. I think people who don't think so are being very naive. That's a good Oregon program right now. Tough game. At Carolina, I don't see Carolina making that much of a jump and Georgia regressing. Should be a winnable game. Missouri should be a winnable game. Auburn and Athens, We'll see. Always a complicated game, but the section that jumps out the most is Halloween on. Florida and Tennessee in back-to-back games. That's a lot to me, and I know I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, but that's a lot in a back-to-back week. Now, Florida does play Texas A&M the next week, so that's one thing where they've sort of stacked these games for Georgia and Florida. So Georgia will play the Gators and then host Tennessee. Florida will play Georgia and then play at Texas A&M. I mean, Florida has a easy schedule, but generally speaking, but they have a stretch here in 4 weeks that is LSU at home, open date, and then they play Georgia and Jacksonville and at Texas A&M. They could lose all 3 of those games. Now, they probably won't, but they could certainly lose all 3 of those games. Georgia doesn't have that, but the Gators do. And there's no one. Utah's not going to beat the Gators. They host Kentucky at the start of the season. I don't think that Florida will lose to Kentucky, and then you got South Florida, Tennessee, Eastern Washington, Missouri. Those 2 games are at home. They should win all those games. And then, LSU at home, open date, Georgia at Texas A&M. That's a brutal stretch. There's not going to be a more difficult stretch for anyone in terms of physical football playing than that stretch right there. That's going to be tough for the Gators. But for Georgia, playing 2 road games to close the season, I just don't know what that's about. And then, Florida, Tennessee back-to-back, I can tell you right now, I don't think that's ever happened in the history of the program. So that is you better be ready by Halloween. Flashing lights. These other games, for Georgia, as I said, you could lose to Oregon. They'll probably be favored. That's going to be a challenging game for Oregon because you're playing it in Atlanta. They've proven that they can win big games on the road. This is going to be a road game for Oregon. They proved it last week against Ohio State, but Ohio State doesn't have a dome. It's going to be tough. That's a tough game for Oregon, but a game they can win. Sanford, South Carolina, Kent State, at Missouri. Sure, you could lose at Carolina in theory. You could lose at Missouri. I don't see that. So you're at worst should be 4-1 rolling into the Auburn game in Athens. Totally could lose that game. Vanderbilt in Athens, no way. I don't see it. And then open date, you play the Gators on the road. To me, the last 4 conference games are complicated. They're not, Georgia probably, honestly, should win all 4 of them. I'm just saying, back-to-back Florida and Tennessee, that's tough. That's tough. That is not easy. And, I'm watching the SEC Network guys over here. I can't hear them because I'm talking to y'all, but that's a challenging section of the thing, but I don't see a bunch of losses on here. This program is at the stage where they shouldn't have a bunch of losses no matter who they play. You opened up with Clemson this year. Okay, you won that game. They opened up with North Carolina in 2016. For lack of a better term, they opened up with Notre Dame in 17, and then in 19 they had South Carolina, which was a ranked team in 2018. On the road. You're going to play challenging games at the beginning of the season. Now, Georgia's stacking them up like crazy. They got Oregon in 22. Need to go look, but they play at, I think, Oklahoma in 23. They play Clemson in Atlanta in 24. They play UCLA in 25. It's just what it's going to be. So the back to this whole thing, though, with shifting people around, what I don't know yet is, will Auburn stay where they're at on this schedule? And honestly, just being straight up, will Tennessee be on Georgia's schedule in the future? So this is the part of the video where, and I don't want to lose viewers here, but if you don't want hardcore talk, it's time to click off the video. But if you do, we don't know how this is going to work out. We don't know when. We obviously know that Texas and Oklahoma are not coming into the 22 SEC football season. So that's not shocking. I wouldn't have been stunned had they showed up in 22, But now you point right at 23 and say, is that when Texas and OU are going to come in? Is it going to be 24? Georgia and Oklahoma play in 23. Texas and Alabama play this year in 22 that I'm talking about. So when do they start maneuvering them in? And, we have seen now a way that the league did things for a long time. In the 80s, they played 6 conference games. In the 90s, they moved to 8, and you got used to the rhythm of the thing. It was South Carolina at the beginning, Tennessee in the middle, the Gators in the late middle, and then Auburn late. Now, then you had Missouri and Texas A&M come in, and it goofed everything up in terms of playing teams like Alabama or Mississippi State or even Ole Miss, a team that Georgia played for decades. What are we seeing here? Is this just a Band-Aid? Is this 2020 and just trying to get through it? I mean, you got to think about in 2017. I want to look back a little bit before I say it out loud, but that was sort of the last normal SEC schedule for Georgia, because in the 18 game was probably, that 18 season was probably the last normal, because in 19 they had a late game against Texas A&M. I'm like, that's never going to happen again. And then you had 20, which was bizarre. 21, you no longer have Auburn at the back, you have Tennessee at the back. That's strange. So will Georgia play Tennessee in the future? I am not convinced they will. I am convinced that they will play the Gators and Auburn. I am not convinced they will play Tennessee or South Carolina, although I am more convinced they'll play South Carolina than Tennessee. We'll see, though. And, they played Kentucky for decades. Are they going to play Kentucky in the future? What are these divisions or pods going to look like? Well, I don't know. I've only covered this, league for 20 years. I don't know what the next 20 years are going to be like. And with all of these games, is there going to be a 9th SEC game in 23 or 4 or 5? I don't know. But if they're going to keep, I am not convinced that Georgia and Tennessee will play forever. I mean, Georgia can't play everybody. They can't play Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, Auburn. I mean, they can't play all those teams and Texas and Oklahoma. They can't play everybody can't play these games. So there's decisions that are going to have to be made. We just know that those decisions are not happening in the 2022 season. Very interesting to see this, because the SEC did not alert anybody that this was coming. I didn't get an email. I know that. So now we've got this schedule out. What do you think? Tell me below. We'll see you over on the website.